Good morning and welcome. We are kicking off another week of daily video devotions through the book of 1 Samuel with 1 Samuel 15. Now, I don't know about you, but as I read through 1 Samuel 15 this weekend and as I meditated upon it, I found myself quite conflicted about what to think about what goes on in chapter 15. And I found myself quite conflicted because God gives King Saul this very specific order. There's this other nation that is threatening the people of Israel, and God wants King Saul to just completely and entirely destroy this nation and destroy all the people and all their possessions and all their livestock even. And for the most part, Saul's obedient to God's command, but when Samuel, the prophet of the Lord, approaches Saul after the battle, we're told that he hears these goats and these sheep making their noise in the distance. And what had happened was Saul had not only destroyed all the people, he had killed most of the livestock, but he had decided that he was going to keep the best of the livestock, all those animals that were without blemish, and he was going to offer them as a sacrifice to the Lord. Well, in my mind, that's not necessarily the worst thing Saul could do. He seems to have fairly good intentions if we take him at his word. But even though he had good intentions, he still didn't completely obey the order of God. And as we see in 1 Samuel 15, God rejects Saul as king, and Samuel gets quite angry with Saul because instead of obeying God's command, Saul thought that maybe he knew a little bit better than God about what he was supposed to do with the spoils of their battle. And that got me thinking about how often in our lives we think, maybe subconsciously or maybe even consciously, that we know God is calling us to do a certain thing, but we're able to rationalize not fully following God's command. Think about that in the context of tithing. The Bible's very clear that we're supposed to tithe 10% of all the income that we receive and to give it back to God. But I'd imagine, I'm a human being, you're a human being, we all struggle from time to time, and it can be so easy to rationalize not giving 10%, but maybe giving 8% or 5% or even less than that, because we feel like we have all these other responsibilities that we have to meet, and God should be able to understand that if we can't meet those other responsibilities, then we won't have any money to tithe. We can rationalize it, but it doesn't make it right. Just like Saul could rationalize not offering all these animals, but it didn't make it right. And there's other things that we can do when we know God calls us to do certain things, but we rationalize away being fully obedient to those calls. Maybe for you, it's when the church calls you to ask you to volunteer to serve on a committee or to help out with a specific mission. It can be so easy to come up with reason after reason as to why you can't fulfill those responsibilities instead of coming up with reasons for why you should. See, like King Saul, so often in our life, we know what God is calling us to do. We know what it means for our lives. But somehow we find ways to rationalize away actually following God's commands. So think about that this week. Think about what you can do to make sure that when God calls you to do something, you're faithful to actually do that thing, and that you don't listen to all these voices in the back of your mind that tries to rationalize away your obedience. We'll see you on Wednesday for 1 Samuel 16.